for thousands of years. I mean, history has basically given China the absolute credit for inventing East Asia's writing system, right?
Yeah.
Its most famous philosophies, the complex cosmology of the I Ching.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you're listening to this and you've ever studied East Asian history, you were probably taught that these towering figures like Confucius and Laozi are the definitive starting lines for this massive river of human thought.
Right. It's the standard narrative.
Exactly. It's a map of history we've all seen and, one we've all pretty much just accepted. But newly unearthed oracle bones suggest the original authors of these foundational ideas weren't actually Chinese at all.
Yeah, which is huge.
It's massive. And we actually have the archaeological and the linguistic fingerprints to prove it today.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is that we aren't just talking about a slight detour, or some minor historical correction in a textbook.
Right.
We are looking at a fundamental redrawing of where the very bedrock of East Asian philosophy, culture, and language actually comes from. And I think we need to be very clear right up front about this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
This is not nationalist myth-making. We are not diving into historical revisionism based on folklore or, internet theories.
Because the sources we're analyzing for this deep dive today rely on hard science, right?
Exactly. We are looking at early oracle bone script, which is known as Zhiguan, and rigorous, peer-reviewed academic research. We're talking about deeply respected scholars like the lifetime work of the Korean scholar Ryu Sung-guk and the incredibly detailed dating work by the Chinese oracle bone expert Dong Zuobin.
Right, so we are just reporting on what the data in these sources actually say. Our mission today is to explore how this historical and archaeological analysis traces the true roots of this culture back to an entirely different ancient group.
Yes. The Dongyi, or Eastern Yi people.
Right. Who are the ancestors of the modern Korean people? It kind of reminds me of, imagine you're standing outside a magnificent, ancient cathedral.
Okay, I like this.
We've spent centuries admiring the stained glass and the spires, but today we're actually going down into the basement. And we're finding out that the foundation was poured by an entirely different civilization.
That is a perfect analogy, truly. And to understand how that foundation was built, we really have to start with what was essentially the ultimate political and social ideal of the ancient Eastern world, which is Confucianism.
Okay, yeah. Because when we hear Confucianism, we obviously think of Confucius himself, right?
Of course.
We think of a strictly ordered society, profound respect for ancestors, moral integrity, filial piety. And Confucius himself constantly talked about this golden age of the past, the era of the sage kings, Yao and Shun, which was supposed to be around 2400 BC.
Right, and for the longest time, modern historians completely dismissed that Yao and Shun era as pure mythology.
Really? Just totally dismissed it.
Oh, yeah. It was treated like an ancient fairy tale that Confucius essentially weaponized, to make a philosophical point to the rulers of his day.
Ah, like a moral fable.
Exactly. Historians pointed out that there were no written documents from 2400 BC to prove these kings ever actually existed. It was considered a mythological utopia. But then, archaeology caught up.
I love when that happens.
It's the best. Oracle bones were excavated from the Shang dynasty, which had moved its capital to Yin around 1200 BC. And when scholars finally started to translate these early scripts, they proved that Yao and Shun were not myths at all.
Wait, so the bones actually referenced them as historical figures, like by name?
Yes, they did. The Chinese scholar Dong Zuobin analyzed the astronomical records and the royal lineages carved into these bones.
Wow.
And by tracing solar eclipses and sequential rain data recorded on the artifacts, he was actually able to date King Yao's reign to exactly 2333 BC and King Shun to 2233 BC.
That is incredible work. Just the mechanism of using astronomical data from ancient bone carvings to move a king from the myth column to the history column. I mean, that's just mind-blowing.
It's a massive breakthrough.
And here's where I have to push back a little on the sources for a second, just to play devil's advocate. The research claims that these kings, and even Confucius himself, were connected to the Dongyi people.
Yes.
Wait, Confucius is like the quintessential Chinese philosopher. Are we seriously relying on some ancient genealogical records to trace his bloodline back to ancient Koreans? Because, I mean, that sounds like a massive stretch.
Well, I get why you'd say that. It sounds like a stretch until you actually look at the primary texts themselves. Because if we look at the ancient text Mencius,
Okay.
which is one of the 4 foundational books of Confucianism, by the way, it explicitly states that King Shun was a man of the Dongyi people.
Wait, it just says it outright.
It is written right there in the classical text. Furthermore, the archaeological evidence from the oracle bones reveals that the Shang dynasty itself, the very dynasty that gave us these written records, was established by the Dongyi.
Oh, wow. So the cultural center of gravity at that time wasn't Han Chinese.
No, it wasn't. And this brings us back to Ryu Sunguk.
The Korean scholar you mentioned earlier.
Right. He earned his PhD in the 1970s precisely by proving, through these excavated oracle bones, that the Shang dynasty's profound spiritual culture lay with the ancient Korean ancestors.
Yeah.
The exact culture that valued this specific social harmony and reverence for heaven, he mapped the cultural lineage. So when we look at the genealogical records tying Confucius's ancestors to the Shang dynasty, we are directly tying them to a Dongyi lineage.
Okay, that completely reframes how I look at Confucius. Because it means he wasn't really inventing Confucianism from scratch, right? He was more like a master editor. Like, he didn't write the original manuscript of these ideas. He compiled, polished, and perfected a wisdom that had already been flowing from the Dongyi people for centuries.
Precisely. Great philosophies are rarely invented in a vacuum by a single person in a single lifetime.
Right.
And this underlying spiritual bedrock wasn't just recognized by modern archaeologists staring at bones either.
What do you mean?
Well, long before the oracle bone data was fully synthesized, brilliant Western intellectuals like Homer Holbert, who spent a significant amount of time studying in Korea, recognized a deep, ancient spiritual capacity within the Korean language and mindset.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he noted that they possessed a foundational philosophy that predated modern borders. He was essentially seeing the cultural echoes of what the archaeologists eventually dug up.
It makes total sense that a society focused on extreme social order would eventually look beyond just human relationships. I mean, if the Dongyi mastered the blueprint for a perfect society, they inevitably had to map out natural harmony.
Which is exactly what happened.
Which brings us to Taoism. Now, Taoism is wild, it's untamed, it's deeply mystical. This is the realm of Laozi and Zhuangzi. And surely you would think this naturalistic philosophy must have different origins than the strict social rules of Confucianism.
You would think so. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the ancient mind didn't see social order and natural order as mutually exclusive.
They didn't?
No, they were two sides of the exact same coin. The archaeological trail for Taoism leads us back to the exact same Dongyi foundation. And to understand why, we have to look at the core mechanism of Taoism, which is Wu Wei.
Right, Wu Wei, which is usually translated as non-action or naturalness, just sort of floating with the current of the universe instead of fighting it.
Exactly. But how do you actually achieve that?
Good question.
It is the incredibly difficult psychological process of stripping away the human ego to reach a state of no desire, no knowledge, and no name.
Wow.
But, crucially, this is not nihilism. It's not about embracing nothingness just for the sake of it. It is the active pursuit of a state called Pu. Yes, P-U-O. It translates to being simple, solid, and completely true to one's essence. In Taoist texts, it is often referred to as the uncarved block.
Oh, I love that imagery. It makes me think of like a raw diamond pulled straight from the earth. Taoism is essentially arguing that the diamond is perfect exactly as it is before society comes along and tries to cut it, polish it, and force it into some fancy setting.
That is a very apt way to look at it, yeah. Embracing that uncarved, unpolished state is what brings ultimate harmony and what Taoists call the three treasures of gentleness, humility, and frugality.
Okay.
But through the continued analysis of oracle bones and early bronze inscriptions, researchers have traced the origins of this Pu concept, this specific reverence for the uncarved block, directly back to the Dongyi people.
Really? The Dongyi again?
Yes. Specifically, it tracks back to the Seonin, who were the immortals or sages, and the Songgu teachings of ancient Dangun Joseon.
And just for a quick timeline reference for everyone listening, Dangun Joseon is considered the very first, earliest kingdom of the Korean peninsula, right?
Correct. We are talking about the deepest antiquity of the region here. So the philosophical blueprint for how to build a perfect society and the blueprint for how to unplug from society and return to your natural state, they share the exact same ancient root system.
Which naturally leads to the next massive question. Because if you understand society and you understand nature, you're going to start trying to figure out the underlying mechanics of the universe itself.
Exactly. You want to know how it all ticks.
Right. Like, how does time work? How do we predict what happens next? And this brings us to divination, specifically the I Ching, or the Book of Changes. Even if you don't study East Asian philosophy, you've probably seen the complex hexagrams of the I Ching.
It is arguably one of the most influential texts in human history. I mean, it was considered so sacred and foundational, in fact, that it survived Emperor Qin Shi Huang's infamous book burning.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah. When the emperor was destroying historical texts and rival philosophies to consolidate his absolute power, the I Ching was spared. Because it was technically classified as a practical divination manual, so it was grouped safely with agricultural and medical texts. Now, historically, there were actually 3 ancient divination texts, but the Lianshan and the Guikong were lost to time. Only the I Ching survived.
But according to the sources we're looking at, how the I Ching was actually used is where the story splits.
Yeah.
It seems like different cultures looked at the exact same book and saw completely different things.
They really did. In China and Japan, the I Ching was primarily utilized for fortune-telling. It was a tool to predict specific outcomes.
Like whether to go to war or when to plant crops, things like that.
Exactly, practical, everyday decisions. But Korean scholars especially, much later during the Hosei Neo-Confucian era, they used it entirely differently. They didn't just use it to see the future, they used it to explain the metaphysical principles of the universe and religion itself. They were looking for the why, not just the what.
Okay, but just because Korean scholars used it differently thousands of years later doesn't mean the ancient Dongyi actually originated it.
That's a fair point.
Right. Like, how do we know the Dongyi didn't just borrow the I Ching from the Han Chinese and then adapt it? Why does the evidence point to them inventing it in the first place?
Well, that brings us to one of the most fascinating archaeological fingerprints I have ever seen. And it comes down to a very specific physical mechanism. The difference between divining with a cow bone versus a turtle shell.
Okay, you have to explain this mechanism to me. Because why does it matter if you use a cow bone instead of a turtle shell? How does that prove authorship?
Because it creates a chronological and cultural timeline that we can physically track in the dirt.
Archaeology.
Exactly. When archaeologists excavate these ancient divination sites, they find a stark difference in the materials used. The Han Chinese primarily used turtle shells, the famous oracle shells.
Right.
But when we dig down to the older layers, the earliest evidence of this kind of divination exclusively uses cow bones. And cow bone divination was the specific, unique practice of the Dongyi people.
How did it actually work? Were they just tossing the bones on the ground and seeing how they landed?
No, it was a highly complex ritual. They would hollow out or drill small pits into the cow bone and then apply intense heat using a glowing metal rod or a burning branch.
Whoa.
The heat would cause the bone to crack rapidly, and the diviner would then interpret the specific patterns and directions of those cracks. Over centuries, the interpretation of these physical cracks evolved into the systematic lines and hexagrams that eventually formed the I Ching.
I see.
And because the cowbone excavations drastically predate the turtle shell excavations, we know the intricate divination methods recorded in the I Ching are a direct evolution from the Dongyi's earlier animal bone practices.
That is brilliant. The bone is the physical fingerprint. It literally proves who was creating the mechanism of prediction first.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the physical method of cracking a bone. It's the massive philosophy embedded in it. The core cosmological concepts that the I Ching rests on, like Taiji, which is the supreme ultimate, and the duality of yin and yang, these weren't late additions by Chinese philosophers.
You are?
No. Archaeological evidence shows these concepts were actively used by the ancestors of Koreans far earlier than previously thought. For example, the iconic Taiji symbol appears much earlier on artifacts, like the Kamuna Temple cornerstone, which dates back to Silla's King Cinnamon in the 7th century.
Wow.
That is hundreds of years before China's Song dynasty formalized their own claims to the cosmology.
So they didn't just invent the method of cracking the bones, they invented the entire cosmological worldview of yin and yang that gave meaning to those cracks.
And they took it a step further. The Dongyi evolved this cosmology into a concept called Ingyuk.
Ingyuk, what does that mean?
It translates to the human extremity or human principle. While the universe has the supreme ultimate, the Dongyi philosophy posited that humans hold their own ultimate principle.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is a uniquely, profoundly human-centric philosophy. It places ultimate value on human beings as the active, balancing force in the universe, rather than just passive observers of fate.
This is a staggering amount of intellectual output. I mean, we have the societal rules of Confucianism, the naturalism of Taoism, the cosmological mechanics of the I Ching, and the human-centric philosophy of Ingyuk, all tracing back to this Dongyi foundation.
It's quite the resume.
It really is. But here is the massive logistical hurdle I keep coming back to.
Okay, what's that?
To pass down incredibly complex, nuanced philosophies like this over thousands of years, you can't just rely on oral traditions or campfire stories. I mean, you need a vessel capable of holding highly abstract thought. You need a formalized writing system.
Yes, you need characters. You need what would eventually become Hanja, or traditional Chinese characters. And once again, we have to follow the archaeological trail.
Where does it lead?
Well, the earliest vessels of this written thought aren't found in central China. They are found in petroglyphs discovered in Ulsan, Korea in 1971, and similar sign characters carved into ancient pottery and bronze along the Bohai coast.
And the Bohai Coast is basically the heartland of ancient Joseon, right?
Yeah.
The undisputed Dongyi territory.
Yes, exactly. These early symbols and petroglyphs evolved directly into the oracle bone script. Now remember the timeline mechanism we just established.
The cow bones predate the turtle shells.
Precisely. The Dongyi's cow bone divination predates the Han Chinese turtle shell divination. Therefore, the very earliest written characters ever carved into those bones to record the results of the divination were created by the Dongyi.
But, I mean, how do we know those early carvings actually link to the modern languages we see today? Is there a linguistic fingerprint that actually survives?
There is, and it is perhaps the most definitive piece of evidence. Today, when Koreans use Hanja, the traditional characters, the written character perfectly matches the phonetic pronunciation.
Oh, really?
Yes, the sound and the symbol are unified. However, in China and Japan, the written character and the spoken pronunciation diverge significantly.
Oh, that makes me think of how Latin functions compared to modern English.
Awesome.
Well, in Latin, the spelling matches the pronunciation perfectly because it's the root source, right? Every letter does exactly what it's supposed to do, whereas English spelling is all over the place, full of silent letters and weird rules because it's a newer mashup of different influences.
Ah, I see what you mean.
The fact that the modern Korean pronunciation matches the ancient characters perfectly is a massive neon sign pointing to original authorship.
It is a profound linguistic anchor. But, and this is the twist in the research that we absolutely have to acknowledge, despite inventing the earliest characters and despite formulating the foundational philosophical ideas, the Dongyi did not actually complete the writing system.
Wait, what do you mean? They invented the written characters but didn't finish the job?
Look at the grammar. When linguists analyze written Hanmun, which is classical Chinese, the syntax and the word order precisely match the Han Chinese language structure.
Okay, why is that significant?
Because we have to understand how fundamentally different these language structures are. Han Chinese is a subject-verb-object language, or SVO. Like English, you say, I drink water. The verb is in the middle.
Right.
But the Korean language is a subject-object-verb language, or SOV. In Korean, you structure the thought as, I water drink. The verb is at the very end.
Ah, so the underlying syntax is fundamentally reversed.
Exactly. And the formalized, finalized, written language of Hanmun follows the SVO structure of the Han Chinese. The way sentences are built to convey complex thought, the grammatical glue that holds the characters together, that final system, belongs to the Han Chinese.
Okay, that is fascinating. Going back to our cathedral analogy, it's like a massive ancient collaboration.
It really is.
The Dongyi, the Korean ancestors, they forged the alphabet, they carved the first phonetic letters into the cow bones, they came up with the raw concepts of nature and society. But the Han Chinese took those letters, wrote the final dictionary, structured the grammar, and ultimately published the books that went down in history.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The philosophical and linguistic bedrock of East Asia was forged by the ancient Dongyi, but it was systematically compiled, organized, and structurally completed by the Han Chinese.
It's incredible.
It is a shared, collaborative heritage. But the true origins have been severely misattributed for millennia.
Think about how we usually view history. We have this very lazy habit of accepting it exactly as it's packaged in a textbook. We assume a single, monolithic culture neatly birthed its own defining philosophies, slapped a trademark on them, and that was that.
Right, the neat and tidy version.
But this analysis proves that human knowledge just doesn't work like that. It's a relay race. Ideas flow across borders, across thousands of years. The baton is passed between peoples, and the final product is always a synthesis.
It completely changes how we view human achievement. It's never solitary. And there is a final, rather profound thought drawn from the very end of our source material today that I think beautifully illustrates this.
Oh, what is it?
The scholars point out a universal truth. Spiritual culture does not exist in a vacuum. The lofty ideas of philosophy are intimately, inextricably tied to material civilization. They influence and shape each other constantly.
Makes sense.
So if these incredibly profound spiritual ideas, this reverence for the uncarved block of nature, this human-centric cosmology of Ingyuk, this desire for perfect social harmony, if all of this originated in the specific physical environment of the ancient Dongyi,
Yeah.
what hidden everyday material artifacts from that era are still waiting in the earth?
Oh, wow.
What physical objects are currently buried deep under the soil of the Bohai Coast or the Korean Peninsula, just waiting to be dug up? Artifacts that will completely rewrite our understanding of how these ancient people actually lived out these massive philosophies day to day. We have their loftiest thoughts written on bone, but we don't yet have the full, vibrant picture of their daily lives.
Wow. That really sits with you. We follow that massive ancient river all the way back, past Confucius, past Laozi, past the great Chinese dynasties, only to find ourselves standing in the basement of that cathedral.
Yeah.
And we're realizing that the foundation isn't just older than we thought. It's vast, it's collaborative, and a massive part of it is still waiting down there in the dark to be uncovered.